Good morning, students. Welcome back to a social science class. Today I'll be starting a new chapter, Forest, Society and Colonialism, from History section. But before I dive into the chapter, let me ask you all to take a quick look around your school and home. At the moment, of course, your home, and identify all the things that comes from forest. The paper in the book you are reading, decks and tables, doors and windows, the dyes that color your clothes, spices in your food, tendu leaf in berries, gum, honey, coffee, tea and rubber all comes from forest. Forest also provides bamboo, wood for fuel, grass, charcoal, packaging, fruits, flowers, animals, birds and many other things. In the Amazon forest or in Western Ghats, it is possible to find as many as 500 different plant species in one forest patch. But unfortunately, between 1700 and 1995, the period of industrialization, 13.9 million square kilometer of forest or 9.3% of the world's total area was cleared for industrial uses, cultivation, pastures and fuel wood. Now, in fact, this is deforestation. Before we try to understand the effects of deforestation, let us see what is deforestation. In fact, students, deforestation means cutting down of trees in large numbers or the disappearance of forest. Deforestation is not a recent problem. The process began many centuries ago, but under colonial rule, it became more systematic and extensive. In 1600, approximately 1/6 of India's landmass was under cultivation. As population increased over the centuries and the demand for food went up, peasants extended the boundaries of cultivation, clearing forest and breaking new law. In the colonial period, cultivation expanded rapidly for a variety of reasons. First, the British directly encouraged the production of commercial crops like jute, sugar, wheat, and cotton. The demand for these crops increased in 19th century Europe, where food grains were needed to feed the urban population, and raw materials were required for industrial production. Second, in the early 19th century, the colonial state thought that forests were unproductive. They were considered to be wilderness that had to be brought under cultivation so that the land could yield agricultural products and revenue and enhance the income of the state. So, between 1880 and 1920, cultivated areas rose by 6.7 million hectares. In turn, what was seen as improvement of the land was only adding money to the British coffers and clearing away the forest area. Well, students, by the early 19th century, oak forests in England were disappearing. This created a problem of timber supply for the Royal Navy. By the 1820s, search parties were sent to explore the forest resources of India. Within a decade, trees were being felled on a massive scale and vast quantities of timber were being exported from India. The spread of railways from 1850s created a new demand in India. Railways were essential for colonial trade and for the movement of imperial troops. To run locomotives, wood were needed as fuel, and to lay railway lines, sleepers were essential to hold the tracks together. Each mile of railway track required between 1760 and 2000 sleepers. From the 1860s, the railway network expanded rapidly. As the railway track spread through India, a larger and larger number of trees were felled. As early as the 1850s, in the Madras Presidency alone, 35,000 trees were being cut annually for sleepers. The government gave out contracts to individuals to supply the required quantities. These contractors began cutting trees indiscriminately. Forests around the railway tracks started disappearing. Apart from this, large area of natural forest were also cleared to make way for tea, coffee and rubber plantations to meet Europe's growing need of these commodities. So, the colonial government took over the forest and gave vast areas to European planters at cheap rates. These areas were enclosed and cleared of forest and planted with trees, tea and coffee. By now students, you all know that the Britishers needed forest in order to build ships and railways. The British were worried that the use of forest by local people and the reckless felling of trees by traders would destroy forest. So they decided to invite a German expert, Dietrich Brandis, for advice and made him the first Inspector General of Forest in India. Brandis realized that a proper system had to be introduced to manage the forest, and people had to be trained in the science of conservation. However, this system would need legal sanction. Rules about the use of forest resources had to be framed. Felling of trees and grazing had to be restricted so that forest could be preserved for timber production. Anybody who cuts trees without following the system had to be punished. So, Brandis set up the Indian Forest Service in 1864 and helped formulate the Indian Forest Act of 1865. The Imperial Forest Research Institute was set up at Dehradun in 1906. The system they taught here was called scientific forestry. In scientific forestry, natural forest, which had lots of different types of trees, were cut down. In their place, one type of tree was planted in straight rows. This is called a plantation. After the Forest Act was enacted in 1865, it was amended twice, once in 1878 and then in 1927. The 1878 Act divided forest into three categories: reserved, protected and village forest. The best forests were called reserved forest. Villagers could not take anything from these forests even for their own use. For house building or fuel, they could take wood from protected or village forest. Okay students, now both the foresters and villagers had very different ideas or views of what a good forest should look like. Villagers wanted forest with a mixture of species to satisfy different needs such as fuel, fodder, leaves. Whereas the Department of Forest on the other hand wanted trees which were suitable for building ships and railways. They needed trees that could provide hardwood and were tall and straight. So, particular species like teak and sal were promoted and others were cut. In forest areas, people use forest products such as roots, leaves, fruits and tubers for many things. Fruits and tubers are nutritious to eat. Herbs are used for medicines. Wood for agricultural implements like yokes and plows. Bamboo makes excellent fences and it is also used to make baskets and umbrellas. Almost everything is available in the forest. Now, the Forest Act meant severe hardship for villagers across the country. After the act, all their everyday practices like cutting wood for their houses, grazing their cattle, collecting fruits and roots, hunting and fishing became illegal. People were now forced to steal wood from the forest, and if they were caught, they were at the mercy of forest gods, who would take bribes from them. Women who collected fuel wood were especially worried, as the forest gods used to harass people by demanding free food from them. Well, students, one of the major impacts of European colonialism was on the practice of shifting cultivation or Sweden agriculture. This is a traditional agricultural practice in many parts of Asia, Africa, and South America. It has many local names such as lading in Southeast Asia, milpa in Central America, tavi in Africa, and chena in Sri Lanka. In India, penda, bevar, nevad, jhum, podu, khandat, and kumri are some of the local terms for Sweden agriculture or shifting cultivation. In shifting cultivation, parts of the forest are cut and burnt in rotation. Seeds are sown in ashes after the monsoon rains, and the crop is harvested by October till November. Such plots are cultivated for a couple of years and then left fallow for 12 to 18 years for the forest to grow back. Now, the European foresters regarded this practice as harmful for the forest. They felt that land which was used for cultivation every few years could not grow trees for railway timber. When a forest was burnt, there were the added danger of flames spreading and burning valuable timber. Now, apart from this, shifting cultivation also made it harder for the government to calculate taxes. Therefore, the government decided to ban shifting cultivation. As a result, many communities were forcibly displaced from their homes in the forest. Well, I'll be stopping my chapter over here, but we'll continue with the same chapter in my next class. Till then, stay home, stay safe.